Grookey, I choose you. Grookey, you scratch.
Alright. Well, Force Field Dog enters the battlefield sideways. Batman summons 2 more rogues and 21. What you got?
Grookey, use reverse.
Oh. That's what you got. Okay. Well. Roll the intro. Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Taylor Campbell here, and welcome back to Comic Crash, my little show on the internet where we talk about comic books and stuff. And today, the stuff we are talking about is this, the Humble Trading Card. Now, trading cards have often been considered kind of comic adjacent, much like video games and action figures are quite a lot of the time. And many of the people that I know that are really into collecting comic books also collect cards. And in fact, most comic shops that I know of, and all of the ones that I go to, also delve into trading cards and have trading card tournaments as well as meets, and they sell the cards as well. So trading card collecting is a very old tradition. It goes back to about the 1860s, during the time of the Civil War. Cigarette companies would often pack cards into the cigarette boxes to give it a little bit more stability. These cards usually advertised just the cigarette companies, but it started to become a point where they would put pictures of nature, of war heroes, of whatever on these cards to try and get an edge on the competition. Hey, if you buy these cigarettes, you get a fun card with it. But what happened was an unintended consequence. What would end up happening was that kids would stay outside of drugstores, and when adults came past with a new box of cigarettes, they would ask for the card, and all of a sudden, a new demographic is born of people who are collecting these cards trying to get full sets. And then that demographic promptly disappeared once World War II hit and there was a paper shortage. In 1945, this guy kissed this girl and the market started back up. Cigarette cards didn't really come back so much, but the cards were still available. They were just packed in with other items. Here in the US, it was primarily bubblegum. And the cards started taking on more of a kid-friendly appeal. Like, what are the things that kids are into? And we're going to make cards based off of that. Enter the baseball card. Now, baseball cards had been around since nearly the beginning of card collecting. After the Civil War, baseball started to become a more favorite pastime of the American people, and so various baseball players would end up on these cigarette cards. But the game really changed in 1952 when the Topps Bubblegum Company created the first real baseball card that not only had a picture of the player on it, but also had a bio and stats on the back of the card. Another innovation in this line was that all of the cards were the same size. You'll notice that before then, trading cards would often come in different sizes and shapes. Some were more square, some were longer, some were small, some were big. There wasn't uniform until this 1952 line from Topps. This also inadvertently created 2 types of cards and 2 types of collectors. You had the sports cards and you had entertainment cards, which were pretty much everything that weren't sports players. This division between sports card collectors and entertainment card collectors stayed pretty consistent up until we get to the 1990s. In the early 90s, we had a couple of different innovations show up that really changed how trading card collecting worked. And the first one, and the reason why I feel justified talking about trading cards here on a channel called Comic Crash, is the Marvel Universe card. These cards are pretty cool. Each featured an illustration of the character on the front, and then on the back had a short description, short bio of that character, along with stats as to how those characters worked, what were their strengths, what were their weaknesses, how intelligent they were compared to other characters. And for a long time, this was like the end all to discussions when we had a character versus character argument. These Marvel Universe cards were extremely popular, getting printed from 1990 all the way to 1994, and then DC Comics followed suit with their own version of that. And both of these were very influential in how trading cards were presented, featuring not just cards with pictures on them, but cards with a gimmick. I was able to find a really great example of this a little bit earlier, and I made a video about it. I'll link it up here at the top. These Toy Story cards that I found. You have standard picture cards here featuring stills and promotional art poses for the movies, but then there's also holographic cards and punch-outs and stickers and even a couple of puzzles. Trading cards weren't just trying to be themselves, they were trying to become games. And in 1993, the next really big year for trading cards, that finally happened with the introduction of Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering took the statistics elements from sports cards and the art from entertainment cards, as well as taking influences from tabletop RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons and creating a fantasy, almost role-playing type scenario game with these cards. This kind of game was definitely considered a niche activity, not a mainstream kind of thing, but it did become mainstream in 1998 with the introduction of Pokemon. Pokemon is a concept that lends itself really well to card collecting. The show and the games themselves could both be interpreted as about card collecting. Heck, even the theme song sounds like you're collecting cards. These cards, Pokemon and Magic the Gathering, they're not just cards to trade with your friends. You could do that, but these were cards that had rules to them. It was a full-on game, and you could play it with other people. The Pokemon craze is kind of hard to describe to people who don't live through it, but you remember back when Pokemon Go was brand new and all of the news stations had to talk about it, every parent had to complain about it, and every event, no matter how small, centered around Pokemon Go was completely packed. Yeah, that was like every day during Gen 1 of Pokemon. And the fact that Pokemon was this big and the card game was huge also meant that all trading cards kind of got huge. They all got a big boost in popularity until we heard this sound. The internet made and still kind of makes anyone who creates printed paper goods a little bit worried, because all of a sudden you can distribute this stuff super easily. You don't have to print anything. And trading cards, they were thinking about ways they could incorporate the internet into their business and not get left behind. This is when we got the digital trading card. This was an attempt, particularly from Topps, who was still leading the sports card industry, to modernize the hobby, to push it into the future. You would pick a card, order it, and the card would be put in storage for you. And you would trade it online using a service that was distributed through Topps. I remember them talking about this. I remember it being advertised on baseball cards that I bought when I was, living back then. And eventually, the physical trading cards to this digital card service would just kind of disappear. What really you got was you got a JPEG that you could flip around, so 2 JPEGs, and loot boxes, pretty much. So the whole value of the trading cards just kind of started to fall apart. But thankfully, card collecting didn't really go away. It kind of had a hiccup with the internet, but it's still there. And even now, digital trading cards seem to have found their niche market with various apps that collect the cards and you can trade them with other people. It's essentially the same thing, but in a much more refined form. Card collecting still exists in its most recognizable paper form, and much like comics, there's a lot of sentimental and sometimes monetary value that comes with card collecting. So if you're looking to try out a new kind of collection and you are already interested in comic book collecting, card collecting might be something you'd enjoy. Most comic shops, like I said earlier, will sell trading cards, And most of the ones I know of will have Magic the Gathering friendly, so if you're interested in playing an actual trading card game like that, you can. And they can give you a lot of great resources as to who to talk to and where to go if you're interested in expanding the hobby. So, pick a franchise, pick a character. If you want to play a game, pick a card game, pick a sport or whatever, and try out collecting for yourself. It could be fairly fun, and it might be something you enjoy. And if you do collect cards, tell me about your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. I'd love to hear what your insight is on this. And hey, until next time, thank you for joining me. Have a great day. And remember to always be your best self.